Today on the podcast, we had one of my all-time favorite people, Swebb. Swebb has been a church leader, a brilliant thinker, obviously his whole life. It's a little bit of his personality right there. But he worked at Elevation Church, helping build kind of the empire we see today. He was a part of that kind of initial big explosion. He's worked with hundreds of different churches, church leaders, and he's got a killer online presence talking about all things church, church building, church thinking. So thank you so much, Swebb, for being on. Seriously, it was so much fun. If you're listening to this, thank you so much for all of our subscribers, the people who like and share this podcast. It means the world. Two big things I want to communicate before we hop into the podcast. Number one, if you're looking to find a church, if you just moved, maybe you are looking to change communities, whatever, there's going to be a form in the notes of this podcast that you will be able to go click and you fill out the form. And then in seconds, you will get connected to a local church. There's about 2,000 church partners we have with Crossover. Seriously, super cool. It's a great resource. And on the other side of it, Swebb has a lot of courses and a lot of great teaching tools and stuff. It's also going to be linked below. Click it. You can actually have him come out to your church. There's a lot of cool resources that he has. So those will also be in the show notes. Thank you so much for watching this. Make sure to like and subscribe the video and the pod. Seriously, means the world. Let's jump right in. Austin, though.
Oh, you never been?
I've never been to Austin.
Dude, you have such an Austin vibe, and that's the rule. You have to have some sort of vibe to visit Austin. Is I guess
Right.
some sort of rule. So yeah, I mean, it's probably worth you visiting. I'm
Yeah,
from the Dallas area though, so
Oh, really?
there's a pretty solid difference between both of them, but
You've
it's
made
worth
it.
it.
What all states have you lived in? Because obviously you're back in Texas. So
Yeah, done a few. Oh, we did
Yeah.
Texas for 29 years. I did, and my wife's a little younger. Then Colorado for a year, North Carolina for 10, Florida for 2, back to Texas.
let's go.
Which
My
I
wife
think are
and
really
I-
the 3 best states, and then North Carolina's just there, but it's pretty good.
Yeah. I've never been. My wife and I were doing like the see how many states we've been in.
Mhm.
And that's the only like states I haven't been is like far East Coast, like southeast. It's like we're going to South Carolina next week, not North Carolina,
Oh, yeah?
but yeah,
Yeah, they're the
I
same.
don't know.
They're the same. I mean, they're probably mad that I say that, but they're the same.
Right. Well, I'm sure people are pumped about our state travels. So
Dude, riveting.
114 listeners already left. That's cool. I'm just kidding. Well, this is Swebb. Swebb, do you want to give like a 30-second intro and then we'll kind of hop in because you've been on the podcast before. So you're returning.
That's true.
guest, which is incredible.
Dude, I know, I can't believe that. Thanks for bringing me back. Let's
100%.
see. Swebb, Texan, kind of a church nerd, done some church stuff, done some team building, some leadership stuff. Worked at a couple of churches, one of them relatively, quote, church famous, that did well for me for a while. And now I just coach and consult churches, coach leaders to so they can build better teams and then build a better church. And then I have a wife for 16 years, and I got an almost 12-year-old, and we are super ready for our big July 4th parade tomorrow.
Let's go, dude. Yeah, it's always interesting. Like we live in California, right? And there's like no fireworks. You can't have fireworks because it's like the whole state will burn down. It's like
And the whole
this is my first 4th of July without fireworks my whole life. I was like, what am I doing?
Come on, man.
I need to
I'm
go
sorry
fly
about
to the
that.
Midwest just for the day, man.
Just for that.
Well,
I know.
Like I said, thanks for being on. I'm super excited. I know that I share probably every single one of your posts every day because I'm like, well, that's either for me, I'm going to throw up because of how true that is, or everything in between. So I have some formulated questions. It's not necessarily normal for this pod because it's just conversations, but I hope that we can just have a conversation through these. So kind of jumping in, I want to pick your brain on some bigger topics that I think you talk about a lot. So jumping right in, what are some like key indicators for you for a healthy church staff? And then on top of that, a church environment. So these are some things that you might walk in for the first time. You're having a conversation. You're like, these are some key health indicators, like KHIs. Nice. Look at that you've seen over your years.
That. Yeah. Well, I mean, I won't spend a ton of time on this little piece of it, but you should have to define stuff first.
Yeah.
Like, health. Some people will be like, healthy things grow. I think that's an incomplete fallacy. Tumors grow and bellies grow. But,
Yeah.
the little alliterated cliche I use a lot is bellies and biceps both grow, but one's with intention and one's frankly just from apathy. And so anyway, so we had to define health in that case. So I don't think it's the healthy things growth thing. So, and everybody gets to define it on their own. They may say numerical size, obviously, or staff health may mean like, oh, we mandate sabbaticals and Sabbaths every 24 hours. Okay, cool. Whatever you define it to be. So that being said, if I can discern or even if I'm told what their definition of health is, then I just come in at the end of the day, I'm looking for consistency.
Mhm.
So for example, I'll just jump right into the spice because I just have to. It's like a rule for me. And I just posted this, I think yesterday, some version of this. Consistency is a big deal. Integrity would be the churchy word for that, or wholeness would be another
Mhm.
great word for that. But you don't get to put excellence on your wall if you're obese. You know what I mean? You can't say, we value excellence, but my car's dirty. Everybody's talking to insiders and none of them are talking to guests. So we start late. There's trash on the floor. The bathrooms look like crap. And most of the staff are obese. Now, I'm not thinking of anybody in particular right now because I visit a lot of churches and that's pretty common. I also
Yeah.
am a former fat kid. So, but that's just an example of when you define it, I just want to see it consistently all the way through. You can't say we're good at blank and then not be whatever that is over here in your personal life. So I'm just looking for that because I think people come into church with a pretty low bar in general. And I think that's okay. Like the world is just like, hey, just do what you said you would do. And that's all I'm evaluating as well. I'm not looking for an elevation church sort of rise in attendance, or I'm not looking for a size of like a life church or a cool trendiness of a VU. And all those are great things, of course. I'm just saying most people come in like, bro, I'm just looking to make friend. So it's already a low bar. And then if we can't even hit that by just doing what we said we would do, I think that's a problem.
Yeah.
And then I can see that. So that might answer some of my point about the church side. Healthy staff, obviously you have to dig in a little deeper there to look a little bit more. But when I'm coming in, again, I'm just listening keyword. Are they saying what, in a closed door meeting that they're saying out here? On Instagram, what's it look like? But then when I'm in the meeting, they're having a whole different discussion that clearly isn't what's on Instagram. I'm here, I'm
Right.
planted forever. And the rest of the time they just hate their life over here. We love our staff. We don't pay our staff. It's all at the end of the day for me, it's consistency. And that'll solve a lot of literal health problems in people's lives too. Just go walk around the block consistently or eat a salad consistently. You don't have to go lift a lot of weights or have a certain sort of genetic makeup. Man, just be consistent. And I feel like
Mhm.
at the end of the day, that's my kind of soapbox I try to harp on, stand on, but I also try to live in. That's something I preach to myself all the time too. So that's the lens I look
Yeah.
through.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's super good. I always my friend and I is a pastor back in Omaha, was my pastor for multiple years or whatever. Always laugh about that. It's like not laugh out of like a like gotcha way, but like
Yeah.
also like,
Yeah.
man, what are we doing? Like we
Right.
only talk about like four things in the church. And it's like
Yeah.
I've never heard actually our new pastor has definitely talked about it because he's a healthy guy. Like he goes
Yeah.
cycling.
Yeah.
Shout out to Pastor Steve Abraham,
Yeah,
super
man.
healthy,
Hmm.
and you call it out. So I like that.
Yep.
So
Yep.
kind of bouncing in the next one that I think it's kind of in the same lane, but for somebody, because a lot of this audience is either 18 to 24 or like that 24 to 30. So they're kind
Hmm.
of on their beginning journey of understanding not just what they're called to, but like what am I actually going to do with my life, right?
Right.
So it's like what are 2 to 3 things that you would recommend to them of having long-term success? Not just like, yeah,
Yep.
you're going to make it to be a lead pastor someday, but like
Yeah.
how can I actually be successful in life in the bigger category?
Yeah, man. Well, again, definitions is a big thing for me. Define success for me, it's being fruitful and fulfilled. You can be
Yep.
fruitful, if you go to do a church staff job, you want to be a lead pastor, some churchy thing like that. That's fine. What is fruit for there? Obedience, probably. I think that's probably fine. But a lot of people might define fruit as in, legacy behind them, aka just turn around. Is anybody following you? Then I guess you're a leader. It's funny how many times we'll give somebody a title of a leader and we look around, nobody's back there.
Oh
So,
yeah.
but just whatever you define, I think it's fine. Just do that. And so that would be like the fruit side and fulfillment. Did it really bring you fulfillment? Or are you always kind of like operating with this sort of angst, this anxiety, this emptiness, this frustration? And that's not like the end of the world stuff. It's not like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I've wasted my life working at Chick-fil-A. I don't think that's a miss. I think it's a miss if you know that it's not all you should do. And then you just kind of apathetically sit back and let your muscles atrophy. I think that's a problem. But man, you can be really fulfilled in a quote hourly, low level job. I don't know. I know plenty of people who are. But that's all about how we define low level. So fruitfulness and fulfillment are the two words that, to me, that's just my Swebb definition of success. And
Mhm.
so in light of that, then I guess in order to do that, you have to know who you are, or at least
Yeah.
strive to figure out who you are. And that's hard. I say sometimes when I'm also in a spicy mood, sometimes you need a mirror to address the elephant in the room. And I sit in a lot of meetings with executives, church executives, and even for profit too. And everybody's like, oh, let's talk about the elephant in the room. Yeah, it's a mirror, bro. Like at some point, do you even know who you are? Do you even know what you believe? Are you even being consistent in your own life? Well, if we can just solve that, you can be real fruitful and fulfilled at Chick-fil-A or In-N-Out Burger, since you're a West Coaster, even though they're in Texas, by the way, they're based here. You know, you can be fruitful and fulfilled there, or obviously chasing and being an entrepreneur and doing all the other things in the
Yeah.
future. So I feel like that's the game changer right there. It's cliche. I know everybody has heard this and been told this in some way, but you just can't put your identity in the thing that you do.
Mhm.
And I know it's easy to do that. I know it's totally easy to do that, but just fight against it and know that, man, this is really great, but it's not me. And
Yeah.
just know the difference in those two things.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's something that I've seen, I think, across the board, because I'm connected to a lot of younger by age leaders, and
Hmm.
it's the identity thing, right? It's the,
Yeah.
what do you do? And it's like,
Mm.
that's not even, I
Yeah.
don't even think that's what Gen Z's questions, they're not even asking, because it's like, I don't
Right.
necessarily think we care, but it's
Yeah.
been modeled. So we're just like, I
Uh-huh.
don't know how to not be awkward. So when I'm at a
Yep.
pastor's gathering, that's just like, what's your role in the church? And it's like, well, thanks for asking. How about, and
Yeah.
every time I'm like, well, how's your wife? It's like,
Right.
let's
Right.
ask like real questions, bro. But
Yep.
yeah,
Yep.
whole different podcast. But
Yep.
I mean, in that same lane, I wanted to ask you. So and you've talked about this multiple times. You've posted about this, like the green room culture.
Hmm.
So I want to talk specifically, hear your thoughts on, anyways. The person who's listening to this who says, I need to be in this room to be able
Hmm.
to fulfill what I feel like I'm supposed to be doing. Or
Hmm.
like you're talking about consistency. They're like, well, I'm consistently showing up to church and
Yeah.
I'm not serving, I'm not giving, but I just want to go to this church to be able to be connected.
Yep.
What would you recommend to that person? And or maybe they are a pastor and they're like, I got to go
Hmm.
to every conference across the whole country to make sure my
Yeah.
name is known. And it's like, that's kind of straightforward, but that's literally
Yeah.
what's going on. Like they would never say that. That would
So
never be
much.
on the IG caption, but that's what's going on. So what would you say to them?
Yeah, dude, that's a fun. And I wish we spent an hour just on that right there. Let me see if I can be concise-ish. Of the green rooms I've been in, not ever as big famous preacher, because that's not me, obviously, but I've just been privileged to be around some of those people. And it's almost definitive. It's almost 100%. I'm not saying it is, but it's pretty daggum close. That the people who tried to get in those rooms are the ones who made news the last 3 years of cheating on their spouse, or having money problems or having anxiety issues that just they end up crapping out and doing something stupid. And again, I know some of these people. I know some of these people personally. The big name you're thinking about right now, probably spent time with them. So there's that. Then the people that everybody actually wants to be like, including all those people who want to be in their green room, they didn't actually try to, and they were just winning. They were just consistent. They knew who they were, obnoxiously so. So my favorite is
Mhm.
Stephen Furtick. Obviously worked with him specifically for 10 years. Been a fan before, been a fan after, and fan, I'm using that obviously loosely here. I worship God.
Right.
Stephen Furtick's a person, yada yada.
Yeah.
But I know that there are
Right.
people out there that, oh my gosh, that's Jesus himself. No, that's not the case, but he doesn't think that either. And so the thing that most people don't know about him is he's wickedly consistent on stage and off.
Mhm.
And he's not the guy that tries to be in a green room. Matter of fact, go search and see how many times he's preached at conferences the last 5, maybe even 10 years. You be hard pressed to find those. But
Yep.
everybody wants to also be in his green room. You see what I'm saying? It's because, man, I'm just like putting my head down, just trying to preach. It's kind of how Stephen Furtick operates. And I'm obviously very general there, just to kind of move through this on pace. But I can give you 1,000 examples. But then there's the guys out there who are living their life in that Instagram tag you're talking about, Instagram, caption you're talking about, and they're thinking that's what makes them successful. And it may get you a mention. It may get you on that particular stage for, a year or two. But by and large, man, those are the people that crap out. So at the end of the day, the advice I would give and the thing I've seen in my own life. Now, for those of you who don't know me, I'm almost 44. I know what you're thinking. You think I look 24. Thank you for that. Thank
Let's
you for that
go. I'm
encouragement.
24.
Yeah, you look a lot better. No,
Stop
but
it.
just for context, I'm almost 44 years old. I've
Mhm.
seen a few things and worked with a few people. And at the end of the day, man, just go win and add value into the world. And I promise 100% it comes back to you. Now, not dollar for dollar. You can't go give money and assume money's going to come back to you, but you can call it karma, or you can read the Bible and have a biblical worldview like we do. And what you put out into the economy, so to speak, God's economy has a unique way of bringing it back in the way that you need it. I even have a Matthew 6:33 tattoo right here on my left, smaller of the two biceps.
Do you believe in
And
tattoos?
I do. And I believe you can have a tattoo and go to heaven later, bro. I don't know if that's
Dang,
illegal to say on here, but
I'm
that's what
canceling
I
the
believe.
pod. As I have a sleep.
But if you just go like win and add value, I promise your name will get out there because your product got out there, your fruit got out there, and people know that you're not posturing and posing. And it's funny when you're like that, everything else about you is whole. Like it's funny too, and I'm not a doctor, I'm not a psychologist, but just go Google some stuff and find you a story that matches with this. But the people that are posing, again, the people that aren't looking in the mirror, the people that are inconsistent, the people that say this is growth, but oh, or this is health, but oh, by the way, I'm obese. Man, those people have other issues underlying, like health issues, personal finance
Mhm.
issues, because there's just not there's no integrity, wholeness. I'm not saying
Yeah.
integrity is in there doing something sinful. Even sometimes it's not. Sometimes apathy, and I know we can argue the sin of that or whatever. But my point is, I just find a lot of other things happen when you're chasing something else, and the people that are the ones we all want to follow, the people we're like, man, how did he do that? We all want to be on his stage. There are full on church organizations and networks that try to be these other churches that were never part of that network. And we're always chasing that thing. And those people they're chasing, nearly every single one of them, they never strove to do that. They were just so boring and consistently winning by adding value into life. And everybody gets out there. The way TD Jake says it, he had this great example years ago, but he kind of runs this image of being born. He's pushing this over the Moses story of how Moses, had to go out into obscurity for, I think it was 84 years old when Moses finally comes back to take the Israelites home, or the Hebrews, or however you want to call it. And so, but TD Jakes and his brilliant voice and insight that he preaches from, he's
Mhm.
like, man, but Moses wasn't ready to be birthed out into his calling, into that where you're in obscurity for a reason. And then he
Yeah.
would say you're incubating for a reason. And when God's ready to birth you out into the world or calling or whatever you want to say, well, then he'll let you know. And a lot
Right.
of times, man, we're just trying to be premature. And we all know what that's like in a hospital room. If a baby's born premature, that's a tense situation that doesn't always pan out well. And I just don't know how we want to do that. And so many of us want to do that. So just fight
Yeah.
against it.
Well, 100%. I always like to use the example, not from me. I stole it from somebody. I don't remember who it was, but it's like Jesus was only in ministry for 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
It's like,
Yep.
dude lived a normal life for 30 years. And for
Mm-hmm.
3 years, he was in ministry, what we would call
Yep.
ministry. So it's
Totally.
like, I don't know. I just think people care about the wrong things. And like you said,
Yeah.
God will increase your influence when your
Mm-hmm.
private life is
Mm-hmm.
right, because as you just said a couple minutes ago, the people who are not necessarily in the game anymore, private life wasn't probably great, and that's just
Yeah.
an assumption, but it's like, and that stuff's going to come out for sure. So
Yeah.
yeah, I
Yep.
mean, 100% agree. So I
Yeah.
want to talk about, so you do this thing called top five. I feel like you've been doing it for a couple years now. I
Oh, my 5 things list. Yeah. 5 things. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, your 5 things. So just for any listeners, I found Swebb on LinkedIn. It came up as a
Oh, yeah. That's right.
suggested top 5, and I was like, "What is this?" Like the one time a year I go on LinkedIn for 30
Mm-hmm.
seconds, and I was
Same.
like, "Well, all right, this sounds like somebody I want to listen to because we have a similar tone." I'll say that.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
So do you have any memories of a top 5 that might have been highly controversial?
Let me see. Half of them are the ones that
Yeah.
come to mind. Depends on what you mean by controversial, but
Yep.
but
And
yeah,
it,
I
so
have a few.
yeah, I mean, so maybe in a way of saying this was not talked about, and you
Mhm.
probably exposed something that might have been triggered in pastors
Yeah.
or leaders.
Yeah, I mean, again, there's a few of them because most of my intent is to expose. And I don't mean like I'm the news guy on the sweeps week trying to
No.
expose
Right.
something. Like it's not that, but it's just I say things. Excuse me. I say things people don't say because I see things other people don't see.
Mhm.
So going back to success or fruit or how to win and all those kind of things in life, my goal isn't to be a preacher. There are more than two jobs, preacher and worship leader. There are more than those two things at church and in life. And you got to know that. And I'd much rather be the guy that has his fingerprints on quote successful people than always having to be within reach, trying to be successful. Again, doing the world terms in that case. So what I say isn't something that's completely revolutionary. It's revolutionary that I said it. And people are like, yes, thanks for putting words to this. So that's just, again, for people who don't know me, there's some of that, like just some of the latest ish ones, like 5 things that are frustrating to most, or for most people to reconcile in the Bible. To me, that's like a controversial one because, we're supposed to preach all these verses, but then we don't talk about, hey man, why don't you go marry a hooker? Like it says that in the Bible.
Right.
Can I be, is this like a PG podcast? Like what rating of podcast is this?
Yo, you can say whatever you want.
Well, let me put it this way. All I'm going to do is tell you a story in the Bible.
Okay.
But I'm telling my kids, and they're 9 and 12. And so some people might find it crazy I say this, but not too long ago, I was telling my son who's 9. Actually, both of them in the car. We were all this is the kind of stuff we talk about as a family. It's crazy. We're driving down the street and I was telling them a story in the Bible about how, man, this one guy, he really wanted a girlfriend. And the dad's like, hey, I mean, that's fine. You can date my daughter, but you got to go cut off 100 weenies from those dudes over there. Now, I know that sounds really crazy. And some of you are like, bro, I can't believe you're even saying that out loud. Hey, it's in the Bible. I don't know what Bible you're reading. So that's just an example of something we can't reconcile all the time, or we could. We just don't like to because it's uncomfortable. So that's an example of what 5 things posted to me is controversial. Let me give you like a couple more that I think are fun. One, I said, this one's probably even just in like the last 5 or 6 of these posts was what is 5 things to which we forget to apply WWJD. We love what would Jesus do bracelets and we love the youth camp vibe of that stuff. But then we forget if we even knew to begin with some of the stuff Jesus actually did. And that really frustrates us. And we like it until Jesus actually does what Jesus did. And then that we can't reconcile that either. So yeah, those are the ones that are controversial, is when I simply just hold up a mirror to myself too.
Right.
Like remember, I had to lose 40 pounds at some point too, because I had gotten sideways. So we all have some crap to deal with, but I'm just apparently the guy that says it.
Well, what I love about what you post or what you talk through on any of these podcasts is it's stuff that I can tell that has been self-discovered, or you've learned it from somebody who was on that journey as well. It wasn't just like you read a John Maxwell book 5 minutes ago and then you started a podcast and we're like, here are 10 tips to have influence. And it's like, and I don't know if it's just churchy word, but like discernment of being able to tell, like, man, this guy actually has walked the walk. And again, I think it does have a lot to do with experience and stuff. But kind of wrapping up here in the last couple of questions, I want to talk through. So you made a post yesterday, or it was yesterday, about finding a new church, and something that actually my wife read it, and she's a big Swebb fan, by the way. She was like, it's funny.
I'm her fan then.
Because her and I always talk about things, and then it's literally like a week later, she'll see a post and be like, I just said this. I'm like, let's go, girl. Man. It's like our personalities are the opposite of Lexi. She's like the sweet, very like timid, but privately a savage.
Yeah, sure.
But she wanted to ask you this, and I think it's a great question. So how you talked about walking into a church that is paying you to critique versus walking into your church.
Yeah.
How does somebody walk into a church and not necessarily what I told her, and you can correct me if I'm wrong publicly right now, don't care. I said, I don't think Swebb turns it off. I don't think you can turn off the way God designed you necessarily, but I bet he has avenues in where he puts those critiques. So the question is, how do you put those critiques away, or necessarily not even have them, just go to church, receive and leave? How do you do that? Because we're in that season 2, by the way. So it's an actual question.
Yeah, no, I get it. It's funny how popular that post became today. I reposted it as a post form this morning from a story yesterday. And I was even a little surprised at how much people are firing off on that, DMs and stuff like, hey, thank you, this is helpful. So, and just a piece of that post is what you're asking now. So yeah, I think the way you said it's pretty good. I don't turn it off, kind of like people try to compartmentalize their calling. If God put it in you, well, I don't know that you're going to take it off and stick it on the shelf. But to your point, you can express differently. You can kind of save stuff up, kind of put this in a bucket to, deal with later or whatever. And that's probably how I do it. I visit many churches, maybe 1,000 churches in my lifetime. I don't know, or literally around the world too. And so I see the same problem with the worship leader who just isn't isn't quite singing the quote right way. We'll just leave it at that. Or you hear that sermon quote that sounds cool, but it makes 0 sense, but it'll stick
Mhm.
really good on Instagram. Like I hear all those too, or the ridiculous stuff we do in the lobbies that build community and all that. I see all of those things too, but but I'm not at church for that reason. Now, if you
Mhm.
pay me to come in and say, "Hey, should we have a coffee shop in our lobby or a soda fountain?" Well, then I'll critique you on that. But otherwise, I'm just going to attend church and contribute. I think a lot of people go into church even if they're not paid to contribute or excuse me, consult or coach like I do. They still go in with this like critical mindset of this just isn't great. Okay, okay, well, go start a church or stay home
Right.
and hate your life and have no friends. I mean, those are your kind of your options. And I just know why I'm there. And that goes back to something I said 20 minutes ago. Like, man, just know who you are. What are you supposed to do? And so critiquing in my case is a job. It's not a spirit. There's the fruits of the spirit. Then there is a skill or a gift of administration and all the things that Paul and others outline as far as spiritual gifts. But those are different things. And so if I'm quote on the job, and in my case, that's kind of a funny job. But when I'm on the job, then I'm there to critique what you told me to critique, as well as a few fringe elements that contribute to that. But we go to a church right now. We just started going relatively recently in Austin, big church. A lot of people know about it. They're connected to a lot of other big names. And we're not there for any of those reasons. Because I mean, for me, I don't care. Been there, done that. But they still do a lot of stuff that personally is annoying. Not because it's like, oh, I'm better than them. It's more just like preference. But like I posted in there, I don't go to church for preference, and neither should you.
Right.
It's not about your preference, and your preference would make everybody else mad over there too. And when you think you're good at something, you're actually not. I mean, we should just go back and rewatch a couple of American Idol episodes to prove that. Granny said you could sing, and we promise you can't sing. And so you got to imagine that what your preference is probably not even right anyway. So I just try to think through that in a logical, wise way. And again, separate myself. Here's who I am, and then here's what I do. And since today I'm not on a do task or a do mission, then I don't need to deal with it. They're singing good enough. I can contribute by singing. This
Yeah.
sermon, I can get something out of it, because that's on me. It's not on them.
Right.
I hope he prepared. I hope the preacher is living consistently. But at the end of the day, even if he just reads a verse of scripture, it is on me to mine wisdom and application from it. As a human, not as an old guy or preacher guy or church guy, as a human being that's gone past puberty, you should be able to mine for wisdom and application from any scripture read. So see
Yeah.
how that preference in that case doesn't matter. And so that's how I'm able to sort of compartmentalize, I guess.
Well, yeah, it's super helpful. I mean, I think we've had a general consistency across the whole board on this
Yeah.
podcast is like
Yeah.
self-discovery, knowing who you are. And if you can't figure out who you are, that's
Yep.
scary. And the other side of it,
Yeah.
have somebody tell you who you are for a couple months. I don't know.
Right.
But
Get you a mentor. Yeah.
all right.
Yeah, man.
Mentor,
Yeah.
therapist, pastor,
Yeah.
and
Right.
somebody to go get a drink with. I don't know. But
That's
kind of
right. Maybe.
last couple questions here. So
Yeah.
can
Yeah.
you share maybe one or two stories of you walking in, working with a church and not necessarily seeing like their numbers? Because I've seen the things that you do. You can definitely increase numbers in attendance, number in servant
Easy.
leaders, whatever. Yeah, it's
So
cake.
easy.
But can you
Right.
share maybe a story working with a pastor, seeing them kind of light up? That I think that would be super helpful.
Yeah, man, that's good. Do you mean them kind of light up as in like, man, they kind of, maybe I took their lid off or something like that,
Yeah,
maybe?
yep. So, yep, you lifted their lid, took their lid off. Maybe you,
Yeah.
like what we just talked about, they maybe lacked in self-discovery. You kind of helped them
Uh
open
huh.
their eyes to that.
Well, two things that come to mind, two examples, and one of them, hopefully it's even answers your question, but the next one I think for sure will. The first one is a church we were attending here locally. Now, I just changed churches. That's not a bad thing because there's nothing wrong with that church other than it's a long way away.
Mhm.
But that pastor's a friend. We moved here straight because of them, not because of the church. But he was a client for a year while I lived in Florida. So when we decided to come back to Texas, which is where we're from, we said, well, might as well just go to that church. So we physically moved to this part of Austin simply because, well, I mean, we'll be kind of near them. But as a client, and when it was just like kind of client coach relationship, this guy is very smart, great preacher, insightful. He's not 22, no offense to anybody in their 20s, but just he's been around. But
Yeah.
what he was missing was simply somebody to spar with. He just needed somebody to punch with back and forth. And a lot of pastors, CEOs, executives, dads, a lot of people just don't have that. If you're a mom and you're a stay-at-home mom, God bless you. But like even that's hard because you're like, man, I'm just with like infants all day. I need somebody to wrestle with. I got to talk to a grown-up. So you see this in other areas of life, but that's what he needed. And to his credit, he was self-aware enough to basically say that. Like that's not word for word what he said, but when we got started together, that's basically what he did. And so over time, I could see him start doing things that I had told him to do 6 months ago. And that's a win for me and a win for him.
Mm-hmm.
I don't need the credit, right? And he doesn't feel weird about just taking a good idea if it's a good idea. And it's
Right.
funny how a lot of pastors, by the way, they do. They're like, it's a great idea, but I didn't come up with it, therefore I can't do it. And this is just the weirdest thing to me, how that
Yeah.
exists. That's not the case in business. In business, they'll just copy you because they're trying to make money. But in church world, for some reason, pastors, dear God, cannot just take a good idea because, the intern came up with it. Well, he's not on the
Yep.
executive team. Oh, that's a consultant. So
Life
it's
church,
so weird. But yeah,
version literally was an
yeah,
intern. It's incredible.
yeah. Just throw the stuff out there and let somebody maximize it. And then we all win.
Yeah.
We're all better for it. So that's a good example. Yeah. So anyway, that would be a good example of something that, somebody just needs somebody to spar with. And now so I think we became friends / working together. Maybe he was running 250 people. Now they're upwards of 900 people. This is just in the last 2.5, 3 years. I feel like that's pretty good. They are above pre-COVID numbers because everybody likes to talk about COVID numbers, but they're above all that junk. So all that's great. Another example that I got this text last week from a guy in Colorado, up in Denver, or Southeast Denver. He is a older than you, younger than me guy that inherited an older church, inherited like a church that existed for like 30 something years before him. A lot of his staff are older than him that he inherited, lead pastor now. But just last week, I'll give you the short version of the story. Last week, he texted me. He's like, bro, I outsourced or gave off 2 things that I've been doing for the last couple of years. And I love that because that's something we've been talking about. Like, hey, listen, man, just give that to somebody else. I promise, even if they suck at it, it's better than you doing it because it's just not essential. It's just not a game changer. And so having people come to that realization, because the effort, let's pretend 20% of his effort went to those 2 things he outsourced. That 20% now comes right back in-house to do what he can do and only he can do, which is, the visioneering stuff or preaching or leading staff meetings or whatever it is that he decides to do. And I love that because I'm a big fan of maximizing potential. And I feel like a lot of times that can only happen or best happen with somebody from the outside looking in and saying, hey, no, this is in you. Because if you're in it, what's the cliche? You can't see the picture for the frame or the forest for the trees. And it's that kind of thing. So for me, I just provide an elevated perspective to be like, no, listen, you're killer, bro. You're sabotaging yourself because of this. And so I love to be able to take kind of those lids off and see. And that happens all the time because I want to say something again. I just said very quickly a minute ago, because the attendance, that's cake. Increasing giving 20%. I put that on my website. Dude, if you want to do that, we'll knock that out in about 20-minute meeting. That's easy. It's you listening to what I have to say, being humble and be like, okay, I will do it. That's a game changer. To me, that's a lid thing. But man, number growth, giving growth, that's cake.
Yeah. I mean, thanks for sharing those 2 stories. I know that there's probably hundreds of them, but just wrapping up here, maybe this is a lead pastor, executive pastor listening to this. I think there's like 100-ish churches in that kind of sphere that listen to this podcast. How do they contact you? Maybe how do they find you on socials? All of that stuff.
Yeah. Well, thanks for that. The easy thing is the website swebb.fyi, not .com, not anything else. Swebb,
Nope.
SWEBB.FYI. That's the easy, way to go see what's on the internet. Of course, you can also follow me at Stephen P. Webb on Instagram, or you can search Swebb and find that on Instagram. And then there's a little bit of credibility there if you want to say that. But just kind of a little aside, I think it's funny. I don't know if you remember this. It's a little older movie now, but Hitch. Will Smith was in a movie called Hitch a long time ago. It's a great movie.
So good.
And that's basically a metaphor for how I do my business. You got to know who I am. You got to know somebody has to have used me before. If you're just trying to look on LinkedIn or something, it's probably going to be incomplete because I'm not the guy that's going to throw out a bunch of logos from churches I've worked at. I love meeting people now. They don't even know I worked at Elevation, much less built a lot of Elevation through different processes and stuff. They don't even know that. And that thrills me because it's like, okay, we're working how it's supposed to work then. So that being said, thanks for putting me on a podcast and even asking that question to get that out there. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
But rarely that's the case. Usually it's like you, man, you stumbled across on LinkedIn or somebody's like, hey, I think I got a guy you should talk to. But if you get into the website, there's a form in there somewhere. You get on Instagram, you can DM me. I'm the most responsive person, at least the most responsive person in the church world you're ever going to meet. I'm saying this to everybody, not just Josh. I will text you back. I will DM you back, and you won't find somebody more responsive. And that I might tell you no, I don't know, but at some point I'll respond, and we'll make things better together.
Nothing more frustrating than a church leader who doesn't respond to texts. It's like,
It's terrible.
I think that's
man.
actually the one thing you should be doing, honestly. I don't know.
That's all you do, man. Is connect with
Yeah.
people.
It's like 24-hour rule, anybody? Well, thank you so
That's
much for being on
incredible.
Swebb. Seriously, like,
Thank you.
last 35 minutes has been gold. I hope that everyone
Yeah.
listening to this doesn't just like, oh, cool podcast. Like,
Yeah.
apply it, listen to it, apply it.
Yeah.
Or I don't know what to tell you. Just kidding. Seriously.
Can't help you.
Yeah, I can't help you. So don't find a different podcast. Nah, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Seriously. Means
Thanks,
the world.
man. You bet.
Boom. We did it.
It's great, dude.
9,000